We are ready to talk about Review and Preview 8.1.4 Part 2. On the first question, with question 56, they show you 3 different box plots for 3 different schools. And parts A through E ask you some different questions about that. For part A, it asks you which of these is a K-8 school. Well, if you look at schools A, B, and C and consider the ages that are across the bottom, if it's a K-8 school, kindergartners are 5 years old. 8th graders are probably as much as 14, so looking for that should help you decide which is the K-8 school, and make sure you tell me how you know. That's what I'm looking at here for part A. K-8 is this school and how I know. It also asks in part A, does that school have more students in K through 2, 3 through 5, or in 6 through 8, and how do you know? To make that decision, you've got to think, okay, kindergartners through 2nd grade are probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. 3rd through 5th would be 9, 10, 11, maybe 12. 6 through 8, 12, 13, 14, probably 11 to start with. So look at the width of each of those sections on those box plot, or on that particular box plot that you're choosing, to tell which group would have more in that age. And that's what this part tells me here. More in which level? You're going to say K2, 3, 5, or 6, 8 has more because. On part B, it's asking, what does the box plot for school C tell you about 11-year-old students at that school? If you look at the width of that space between 11 and 12, you need to look at what portion of the school that's represented just between 11 and 12. That's what it's asking you there. That portion could be expressed as a percent or as a fraction. Either one is okay. A little heads up that part C might be a little bit of a trick question, so heads up on that. Part D asks you to make a conjecture or a prediction, maybe it's even a guess, about how the data was collected. How do you think you would go about finding out this information about the ages of a student in a school? Is it something you could look up? Is it something you would have to find out personally? What would you do if you had to get that information? Lots of ways that could be answered. For part E, where they're asking you to focus specifically on school B and asking you to make some statements. You can bullet point your statements. You don't have a whole lot of room, but at least give me more than one statement. You could talk about the center, the shape, the spread, the outliers. So things you could identify would be the median, perhaps. Tell me what the median is. Are there any outliers? Is the distribution symmetric? We're looking at the shape of each of the size of each of the parts, each of the quartiles to make that decision. So lots of different observations you could make for part E. On question number 57, we have some division problems. You've got space here where you need to write down what they are, because for part A, the first thing you need to do would be to change those mixed numbers to improper fractions. And once they're improper fractions, you can choose your division strategy. You could do crisscross. You could invert and multiply, you could find common denominators, or you could use a super giant one. Any of those 4 strategies will work. For part B, when you set things up with your decimal, you need to make sure you get your dividend and your divisor in the right place. Your dividend that you're dividing by is 14.76. Your divisor is what you're dividing by, is what goes out front. You want to start by making sure that your divisor becomes a whole number, so we move that decimal twice. If I do that to the divisor, I have to do the same thing to the dividend, and then I should be good to divide from there. Remember, we're not going to have leftovers. We're going to put a 0 and bring it down to keep dividing. For part C, you've got mixed numbers again, so start with the same thing for part A. Make them improper fractions, and then choose your division strategy. On question number 58, they're asking you for the next 3 terms in that number pattern. You want to start by looking at the pattern itself and decide by how much is it increasing each time. The first step, it increases by what? 2. Then the next increases by 4. The next increases by 6. So there's a pattern that you're looking for there. In these three blanks, I want to see what the next three terms are in the pattern. And when it says description in words, we're going to say start with 1, because that's what your pattern starts with. Start with 1, and then you're going to tell me what happens each time to get to the next number in the term. We're adding here, you can see. So start with 1 and add how much repeatedly, and so on. All right, for question 59, they're asking you for prime factorizations. For prime factorizations, remember it might be helpful to make a factor tree. Now remember, if a number is prime like 3 or 7, then there won't be a factor tree. There is no prime factorization. It would just be 3 or 7. But if it's a number like 24, there's room over here on the side for you to make your factor tree for 24. So I'm looking for the prime factorizations on each to be written in these blanks. Remember, when we write out the prime factorization, it's going to look something along those lines, showing those prime factors being multiplied together. Then underneath is where I want to see what's the LCM, so what's the smallest thing both of those numbers will go into. And the GCF means what's the biggest thing they can both be divided by. What will that part be there? Your last one, for number 60, has some expressions. And it asks us to do some rewriting on the first 4. The first 4, all we have to do is rewrite. So for part A, since it has parentheses, our job is to rewrite it without. The same for part B. To do that, you are going to want to distribute the number that's in front of the parentheses by multiplying it by everything inside. And heads up on part B, make sure that you put your X terms together so that we have the simplest version. On part C and part D, we have to rewrite those expressions with parentheses. So we're looking at what can both of these terms be divided by. That's going to show us what goes in front of the parentheses, and then what's left, let's see, that's part D, so addition. And what's left would be what goes inside. On part E and part F, all they're asking you to do is evaluate those expressions. They tell you that X equals 1/2 and Y equals 3. So substitute those values in place of the variables in the expressions and then follow order of operations to simplify them.